The river was raging after the storm, brown, violent water ripping past the rocks like it wanted to swallow the whole world. Most people ran from it, but a little girl in a yellow raincoat ran toward it. She saw a hand, just a hand clawing out of the current, a stranger gasping, disappearing, fighting for his life. "Hold on!" she cried, digging her small sneakers into the mud, grabbing a broken tree branch and leaning out with her whole body. No one else was there. No adults. No lifeguards. No time. Just a child and a drowning man twice her size. With shaking arms and sheer, terrifying determination, she pulled and screamed for him not to let go. Seconds felt like hours until the water finally surrendered him to the shore. He collapsed, coughing, soaked, barely breathing, and when he looked up, his eyes widened, because the girl who had saved him, this tiny stranger, was staring back at him with innocent concern. She didn't know the truth, didn't know the tattoos, didn't know the name whispered in fear across the city, didn't know she had just rescued the man every police force was hunting, the most dangerous mafia boss in the region. And as he looked at her, something shifted behind his eyes, something no one alive had ever seen in him. Gratitude and a promise. What he did next would shock everyone who thought they knew who he was. Stay with me until the end, because what this mafia boss decides to do for that little girl will rewrite everything you think you know about loyalty. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. 10-year-old Emma Martinez had always been drawn to the river. It wasn't because she was reckless or seeking danger. Something about the water called to her, especially after storms when it transformed from a gentle stream into something wild and untamed. That Tuesday afternoon, the October rain had been relentless. School was canceled, roads were flooded, and most families were huddled inside watching the news report about flash flood warnings. But Emma had slipped away from her grandmother's watchful eye, pulled by an urge she couldn't explain. The yellow raincoat had been her mother's before she passed away 3 years earlier. Emma wore it everywhere, like armor against a world that had already taken too much from her. Her grandmother Rosa always said Emma had her mother's heart, too big for her own good, always trying to help others even when she barely had enough for herself. They lived in a small apartment above the bodega Rosa had run for 30 years. Money was tight, but love was abundant. Emma had learned early that sometimes the most important things in life cost nothing at all. As she approached the riverbank that afternoon, the sound was deafening. Water crashed against rocks with a violence that should have sent any reasonable person running in the opposite direction. The rain had turned the Hoka, normally clear stream, into a churning mass of debris, mud, and raw power. That's when she heard it. A voice, desperate and fading, barely audible above the roar. Most adults would have called for help first, would have looked for someone stronger, someone better equipped to handle the situation. But Emma didn't think about what she couldn't do. She only saw what needed to be done. The man in the water was fighting for his life. His expensive suit was torn and waterlogged, his dark hair plastered to his head. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, mixing with the river water as he struggled against the current that seemed determined to claim him. What Emma couldn't see were the scars that marked his body, each one telling a story of violence and survival. She couldn't read the intricate tattoos that covered his arms and chest, symbols that would make grown men cross the street to avoid him. She had no way of knowing that the hands now desperately reaching for salvation had ordered the deaths of dozens of people. To Emma, he was simply someone who needed help. The branch she grabbed was thick and sturdy, probably torn from one of the old oak trees upstream during the storm. It was almost too heavy for her small frame, but adrenaline gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. "Grab the branch!" she shouted, her voice cracking with effort as she extended it toward him. The man's eyes, gray like storm clouds, locked onto hers. For a moment, time seemed suspended. Here was a child, alone and vulnerable, risking her own safety for a complete stranger. In his world, such acts of selfless courage were extinct, crushed under the weight of greed and survival. His name was Vincent Caruso, though most people knew him simply as the Wolf. At 42 years old, he controlled the largest criminal organization on the East Coast. Politicians feared him. Rival families respected him. Law enforcement had been hunting him for over a decade without success. He had built an empire on fear, loyalty purchased through intimidation, and respect earned through ruthlessness. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, and mercy was a weakness that could get you killed. But as his fingers finally wrapped around the branch, as this small girl with determined eyes refused to let go despite the current, trying to pull them both into the churning water, something inside Vincent's carefully constructed walls began to crack. Emma's feet slipped in the mud as she pulled with everything she had. The man was heavy, waterlogged, and the current fought her for every inch. Her arms burned, her back ached, but she gritted her teeth and held on. "Don't let go!" she screamed, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to him or to herself. Vincent used what little strength he had left to help, kicking against the river bottom when he could find it, using the branch to pull himself closer to shore. Each movement was agony, his body battered from whatever had thrown him into the water in the first place. When they finally collapsed together on the muddy bank, both gasping and shaking, Vincent found himself staring at his rescuer in disbelief. She couldn't have weighed more than 70 pounds, soaking wet. Yet she had just accomplished what trained soldiers might have failed to do. Emma knelt beside him, her young face creased with worry. "Are you hurt? Should I call someone?" Vincent coughed up river water, his throat raw and burning. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. You saved my life." The simplicity of her response would haunt him for years to come. You needed help. No calculation. No expectation of reward. No fear of the consequences. Just pure, innocent humanity in its most basic form. As Vincent struggled to sit up, Emma noticed the cut on his forehead was still bleeding. Without hesitation, she pulled off her yellow raincoat and pressed it against the wound. "This should help stop the bleeding," she said, with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who had learned to take care of others at a very young age. Vincent stared at the coat, now stained with his blood, yellow like sunshine, like hope, like everything his dark world had forgotten existed. That's when he noticed her shoes. They were worn, probably hand-me-downs, with holes that let the rain seep through. Her jeans were patched at the knees, and her sweater had been mended more than once. This child, who had just risked everything to save him clearly, had very little for herself. The realization hit him like a physical blow. In his 42 years of life, Vincent Caruso had never felt vulnerable. Power was his currency, fear was his language, and control was his religion. But sitting on that muddy riverbank, blood mixing with rainwater, staring at a child who had just saved his life, vulnerability crashed over him like the current that had nearly killed him. Emma was still pressing the yellow raincoat against his forehead, her small hands gentle but firm. She hummed softly while she worked, a melody Vincent didn't recognize, but somehow found comforting. When was the last time someone had shown him such tender care, without wanting something in return? "What's your name?" he asked, his voice still hoarse from the river water. "Emma," she replied without hesitation. "Emma Martinez." "What's yours?" Vincent paused. For over 2 decades, introducing himself meant watching people's faces change. Recognition would dawn, followed by fear, respect, or calculation. But Emma's eyes remained unchanged, warm and concerned. "Vincent," he said simply, leaving out the surname that appeared in FBI files and newspaper headlines. "Nice to meet you, Vincent. Even though I wish it wasn't because you almost drowned." He almost smiled at that. When was the last time someone had spoken to him with such honest simplicity? As Emma continued tending to his wound, Vincent's trained eyes automatically scanned their surroundings. Old habits died, hard, and even in his weakened state, He was assessing potential threats. The riverbank was deserted, the storm having driven everyone else indoors. But in the distance, he could hear sirens, probably responding to flood-related emergencies throughout the city. He needed to move soon. His men would be looking for him by now, and the last thing he wanted was for Emma to get caught up in the chaos that followed him everywhere. But first, he had to understand what had happened to him. The memories came back in fragments. He had been leaving a meeting at the warehouse district when the ambush happened. 3 cars, automatic weapons, the kind of coordinated attack that meant someone close had betrayed him. His driver Marcus had been hit first, the car spinning out of control before plunging through the guardrail and into the swollen river. Marcus. Vincent's chest tightened with grief and rage. The man had been with him for 8 years, loyal, dependable, more than an employee. He had a wife and 2 young daughters. "Are you okay?" Emma's voice broke through his dark thoughts. "You looked really sad for a minute." Vincent studied her face. Most people learned early not to comment on his expressions, not to ask personal questions. But Emma seemed genuinely concerned about his emotional state, not just his physical injuries. "Someone I cared about got hurt today," he said carefully. Emma nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry. It's really hard when people we love get hurt." There was something in her voice that suggested she knew this pain intimately. Vincent found himself asking, "Have you lost someone close to you?" "My mama," Emma said quietly, still holding the raincoat against his forehead. "She got sick when I was 7. The doctors tried really hard to help her, but sometimes trying hard isn't enough." The matter-of-fact way she spoke about such profound loss hit Vincent harder than any physical blow he'd ever received. This child had faced the kind of grief that broke grown men, yet she had still risked her life to save a stranger. "I live with my abuela now," Emma continued. "She's really good to me, but she worries a lot. She's probably looking for me right now." Vincent felt a stab of guilt. He had kept this child out in the cold rain, bleeding on her mother's coat, while her grandmother was probably terrified about where she was. "You should go home," he said, starting to pull the raincoat away from his head. "Your grandmother needs to know you're safe," but Emma pressed the coat back firmly against his wound. "The bleeding hasn't stopped yet. Mama always said you don't leave someone who's hurt until you know they're going to be okay." Vincent stared at her. This tiny force of nature who had appeared in his darkest moment, like some kind of guardian angel. In his world, loyalty was bought, traded, or enforced through violence. But Emma's loyalty was freely given, pure and unconditional. "Tell me about your mama," he said, partly to keep her talking while he figured out his next move, partly because he genuinely wanted to know more about the woman who had raised such an extraordinary child. Emma's face lit up despite the somber topic. She was a teacher at the elementary school. She loved books and always said stories could take you anywhere you wanted to go. She used to read to me every night, even when she got really sick and it was hard for her to talk. What was her favorite story? She liked the ones where someone small and ordinary saves the day, Emma said with a small smile. She always told me that heroes don't have to be big or strong or famous. Sometimes the most important heroes are the ones nobody expects. The words hit Vincent like lightning. Here he was, one of the most feared men on the East Coast, saved by the most unlikely hero imaginable. Emma's mother had been preparing her daughter for this moment without even knowing it. "She sounds like she was very wise," Vincent said softly. "She was. Abuela says I have her heart. Sometimes I think that's why it hurts so much, because it's too big for just me." Vincent felt something shift inside his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in decades. Was this what normal people called emotion? This strange mixture of pain and warmth and something that felt almost like hope. The sound of approaching voices made them both look up. A search party was making its way along the riverbank, flashlight beams cutting through the growing dusk. Vincent recognized his own men among them, their faces grim with worry and barely contained violence. He had seconds to make a decision that would change everything. "Emma," he said urgently, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Some people are coming, and they might not understand what happened here. I need you to go home now, and I need you to promise me something." Emma's eyes widened at the serious tone in his voice, but she nodded. "Promise me you won't tell anyone about helping me today. Not your grandmother, not your friends, not anyone. Can you do that for me? Are you in trouble?" she asked with the intuitive wisdom that children sometimes possess. Vincent chose his words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups have complicated problems. I don't want any of those problems to find their way to you." Emma studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I promise." "But Vincent?" "Yes? Are you going to be okay? I mean, really okay?" The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked about his well-being and actually cared about the answer? "I'm going to be fine," he said, and realized he meant it in ways that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. Emma carefully folded the blood-stained raincoat and handed it back to him. "Keep this," she said. "Mama always said yellow was the color of hope." Before Vincent could respond, she had slipped away into the gathering darkness, moving with the practiced stealth of a child who had learned to navigate the world quietly. Vincent clutched the small yellow raincoat as his men's voices grew closer. The fabric still held traces of her warmth, her scent of rain and innocence, and something indefinably pure. Tony Marcelli, his lieutenant, emerged from the brush first, relief flooding his weathered face. "Boss, Jesus, we thought you were dead. The car, the river, we couldn't find you anywhere." "Marcus?" Vincent asked, though he already knew the answer from Tony's expression. "He didn't make it, boss. I'm sorry. We got him out, but he was already gone." Vincent closed his eyes, feeling the weight of another good man's death on his shoulders. But for the first time in his criminal career, grief wasn't immediately followed by thoughts of revenge. Instead, he found himself thinking about Emma's words about heroes who nobody expects. "Boss, we need to get you to a doctor," Tony continued. "That cut looks bad, and you're hypothermic. Who knows what kind of bacteria is in that river water?" Vincent stood slowly, his body protesting every movement, but his mind was clearer than it had been in years. As his men surrounded him, offering coats and support, he looked back toward the direction Emma had gone. He had built an empire on the principle that everyone had a price, that loyalty could be bought or coerced. But a 10-year-old girl had just proven him wrong. She had given him everything, asked for nothing, and disappeared into the night like she had never existed at all. Except she had existed. She had saved him. And now Vincent Caruso owed a debt he had no idea how to repay. But he would find a way, because for the first time in his adult life, he had encountered something worth protecting that had nothing to do with power, money, or fear. He had encountered pure goodness, and it was going to change everything. Everything. The safe house was a fortress of shadows and whispered conversations. Vincent sat in the leather chair that had witnessed countless meetings, countless decisions that shaped the underworld of the city. But tonight, everything felt different. The yellow raincoat lay folded on his desk, a splash of brightness in a room designed for darkness. 3 days had passed since the river. 3 days since Emma Martinez had pulled him from death's grip with nothing but determination and a heart too big for her small frame. 3 days of Vincent staring at that coat and feeling something he hadn't experienced in decades. Change. Tony Marcelli knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege earned through 15 years of unwavering loyalty. His face carried the weight of bad news. "We found who ordered the hit," Tony said, settling into the chair across from Vincent's desk. "It was Salvatore's nephew, that punk Angelo. He's been making moves, trying to convince the other families you're getting soft." Vincent's fingers traced the edge of Emma's raincoat. In the old days, before the river, Angelo would already be dead. His body would be sending a message to anyone else who thought Vincent Caruso was weak. But now, something held him back. "What else?" Vincent asked, his voice quiet. "Angelo's been talking. Says you've lost your edge, that you're more concerned with legitimate businesses than protecting our interests. He's got backing from some of the younger guys who think violence is the only language worth speaking. Vincent stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Emma was probably doing homework at her grandmother's kitchen table, unaware that her act of kindness had shattered the foundation of everything he thought he knew about himself. "Schedule a meeting with Angelo," Vincent said finally. Tony raised an eyebrow. "A meeting? Boss, this guy tried to kill you. He murdered Marcus. Since when do we negotiate with people who—" "Since now," Vincent cut him off. "Set it up. Tomorrow night. Neutral ground." "Vincent, I don't understand. This isn't how we handle disrespect. This isn't how we handle betrayal." Vincent turned from the window, and Tony saw something in his boss's eyes he'd never seen before. Not weakness, but something deeper. Something that looked almost like peace. Maybe it's time we handled things differently. The next evening, the abandoned warehouse echoed with tension. Angelo Salvatore swaggered in with 4 bodyguards, his young face twisted with arrogance and ambition. He was 28, hungry, and stupid enough to believe that violence was the only path to power. Vincent arrived alone. "You got some balls, old man," Angelo sneered, his hand resting on the gun tucked into his waistband. "Coming here without your army." Vincent studied the young man who had orchestrated Marcus's death. 2 weeks ago, Angelo would already be bleeding on this concrete floor. But Emma's voice echoed in his mind, talking about heroes who nobody expects. "I came to offer you something," Vincent said calmly. Angelo laughed, the sound sharp and ugly in the empty space. "You're offering me something. You're the one who's finished, Caruso. The families are tired of your soft approach. They want someone with fire in their belly. And you think that's you?" "I know it is." Vincent nodded slowly. "Then prove it." He reached into his jacket, and Angelo's men tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. But Vincent only pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents. "These are the locations of all my legitimate businesses," Vincent said, placing the envelope on a rusted table between them. "Bank accounts, property deeds, everything worth about $50 million. Angelo's eyes widened with greed and confusion. "What's the catch?" "No catch. It's yours. All of it." The young man's hand shook slightly as he reached for the envelope. "This is some kind of trick." "No trick. But there are conditions." Angelo froze. "I knew it." Vincent stepped closer, and something in his presence made even the bodyguards take a step back. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades of command. "You leave my people alone. The families who have been loyal to me. The businesses that operate under my protection. The neighborhoods where children play safely because of the order we maintain. You touch any of them, and I'll remind you why they call me the wolf." Angelo's bravado flickered. "And what about you? You just disappear?" "I'm retiring," Vincent said, and the words felt strange and right in his mouth, effective immediately. The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of rain beginning to tap against the broken windows. Angelo stared at the envelope like it might explode. "This is insane," he whispered. "Nobody just walks away from this life." Vincent smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd worn in years. "Watch me." He turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Angelo and his men standing in stunned silence. As he reached the door, the young man's voice stopped him. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Vincent paused, his hand on the rusted handle. He thought about Emma's small fingers pressing her mother's raincoat against his bleeding forehead. He thought about her promise to keep his secret, given freely without expectation of reward. "Because someone reminded me what it means to be human." The rain was gentle this time, not the violent storm that had nearly claimed his life. Vincent walked through the empty streets, feeling lighter with each step. Behind him, his old life crumbled. Ahead of him, something new waited. But first, he had a debt to pay. Rosa Martinez was closing up her bodega when the well-dressed stranger appeared at her door. She'd been in this neighborhood long enough to recognize danger, and something about this man's expensive suit and careful movements set off every alarm in her head. "We're closed," she said through the glass door, her hand moving toward the panic button beneath the counter. Vincent held up his hands in a gesture of peace. Mrs. Martinez, I just want to talk. It's about Emma. Rosa's blood turned to ice. What about my granddaughter? If you've hurt her, I swear. She saved my life. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them expected. Rosa studied the stranger's face, searching for deception, for threat. Instead, she saw something that looked like gratitude. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. Vincent smiled sadly. She promised not to tell anyone. She's a good girl, your Emma. She keeps her word. Who are you? Someone who owes your granddaughter everything. Rosa unlocked the door slowly, every instinct screaming at her to run. But there was something in this man's eyes that spoke of sincerity, of a debt that needed to be paid. 5 minutes? She said. Then you leave. Vincent stepped inside the small store, taking in the carefully organized shelves, the family photos behind the counter, the atmosphere of love and struggle that permeated every corner. This was Emma's world, modest but rich in ways his mansion had never been. 3 days ago, your granddaughter pulled me out of the river, he said quietly. I was drowning, and she risked her life to save mine. Rosa's hand flew to her heart. Emma was at the river. During the storm, she said she was at the library. She lied to protect me, and probably to keep you from worrying. Are you police? FBI? What kind of trouble is my Emma in? Vincent met her eyes, and Rosa saw something there that made her step back. Not cruelty, but power. The kind of power that came from years of making life and death decisions. Your granddaughter isn't in any trouble, he said, but I need you to know that she's under my protection now. Forever. Anyone who tries to hurt her, or you, will answer to me personally. I don't understand. Who are you? Vincent pulled out a business card and placed it on the counter. It was simple, elegant, with only a name and phone number. But Rosa had lived in this city long enough to recognize the name that appeared in newspaper headlines and police reports. Her face went pale. You're Vincent Caruso. I was. As of tonight, I'm just a man who owes your family a debt I can never fully repay. Rosa sank onto the stool behind the counter, her mind reeling. My Emma saved you? The Vincent Caruso? She did. And she changed my life in ways she'll never understand. Vincent reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. This is for Emma's education. College, graduate school, whatever she wants to study. There's enough here to make sure she never has to worry about money. Rosa stared at the envelope like it was radioactive. I can't accept this. This is blood money. No, Vincent said firmly. This is clean money. Legitimately earned from businesses I'm turning over to charity. Your granddaughter gave me something priceless. Let me give her a future in return. She won't understand where it came from. I'd have to lie to her. Vincent nodded. Tell her it's a scholarship. Tell her it's from her mother's old school. Tell her whatever helps you sleep at night. But don't let pride rob Emma of the opportunities she deserves. Rosa picked up the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavier than it looked, weighted with possibility and fear in equal measure. What do you want from us? She asked. Nothing. I want Emma to grow up safe, educated, and free to become whatever she dreams of becoming. I want her to keep that beautiful heart that saw a stranger in trouble and didn't hesitate to help. And if I say no? Vincent smiled, and for the first time, Rosa saw not the dangerous criminal from the newspapers, but a man touched by grace. Then I walk away, and you never see me again. But the protection remains. Emma saved my life, Mrs. Martinez. That creates a bond that can't be broken by refusing money. Rosa looked at the photograph of Emma on the wall behind the register. Her beautiful granddaughter, so much like her mother, with eyes full of compassion and a spirit that refused to be dimmed by loss. She's all I have left, Rosa whispered. Then we both want the same thing, Vincent replied. To keep her safe and help her shine. The old woman clutched the envelope to her chest, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Why are you doing this? Vincent thought about the yellow raincoat folded in his car, about Emma's small hands refusing to let go when the current tried to claim him. about the way she'd looked at him with pure concern for a complete stranger. Because your granddaughter reminded me that there's still good in the world, and good deserves to be protected. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Mrs. Martinez, Emma asked me if I was going to be okay. Really okay. Tell her yes. Tell her I found my way home. Vincent stepped back into the rain, leaving Rosa Martinez standing in her small store with enough money to change her granddaughter's life forever and questions that would keep her awake for nights to come. But as she watched the mysterious stranger disappear into the darkness, Rosa felt something she hadn't experienced since her daughter's death. Hope. Pure, impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, the world still had room for miracles. And somewhere across the city, a 10-year-old girl in a modest apartment was doing her homework, completely unaware that her single act of kindness had just rewritten the rules of an entire criminal empire. The yellow raincoat would hang in Vincent's closet for the rest of his life, a reminder that sometimes salvation comes in the smallest packages. But Emma Martinez would never know that she had saved more than a drowning man that day. She had saved his soul. 2 years later, Emma Martinez graduated valedictorian from the most prestigious private school in the city. She never questioned the scholarship that had appeared mysteriously after that stormy October day. She was too busy excelling in every subject. Her essays filled with wisdom beyond her years about kindness, courage, and the power of small acts to change the world. Vincent Caruso watched from the back of the auditorium, a ghost in an expensive suit that no longer carried the weight of violence. He'd kept his promise. Emma was safe, protected, free to become everything her mother had dreamed she could be. As she walked across that stage, her yellow dress bright as sunshine, Vincent felt something he'd never experienced before. Peace. True, complete peace. Emma's story reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they wear yellow raincoats and have hearts too big for their small bodies. Sometimes they see a stranger drowning and dive in without thinking about the consequences. And sometimes, just sometimes, one act of pure kindness can rewrite an entire life story.